lovely to see so many familiar faces here this evening. I guess it's a tinge of sadness we're here today, but for the most part it's a celebration of what was a great event, the Pirongia Boxing Day races here for the Alexander Racing Club. I think it's opportune time to introduce our president, Don Bush-Mackey.
Thank you, Bruce.
Just note the bar will remain open while Bush is going through this speech, because you will get thirsty.
Yes, if your glasses get empty, please don't worry about the fact that I'm rambling on. The bar is open. How do you cover 150 years in half an hour? You grab a copy of the book and you work your way through it. So let's see how I go. Towards the end of the book, there's a final observation by me, the last president of the Alexander Racing Club. On looking through the draft of Alan Hall's excellent book, I could not help feeling that this story accurately mirrors the development of our country over the last 150 years. New Zealand has evolved from a very young British colony of the 19th century through to a highly socialised modern Western democracy of the 21st century, along with all the advantages and disadvantages that this brings. For the first 50-odd years of the annual Pirongia picnic race meeting, there were no cars or very few. Everyone travelled by horse or horse and cart. The internal combustion engine and tar-sealed roads were unimaginable. The predominance of the horse and the competitive human element is what started the contest, horse against horse, rider against rider. Inevitably, this led to gatherings of horses and the citizens of the time, the pioneer settlers, farmers, militia, publicans, who had to compete amongst themselves to prove their boasting of the speed and stamina of their horses. And so the Alexandra Racing Club was born. Alan talks of the number of Maori who would ride up from the King Country for the occasion, which was both a social gathering and an opportunity to try out their own horses and riders against the best in the district. Their journey up and back took days, and it was a highlight of the year. There are several reasons why the Alexandra Racing Club has had to terminate its meetings, not least of which has been the cost of meeting all the modern bureaucratic requirements involved with running a public meeting. This means getting licences for controlling the traffic ingress and egress off the public road, controlling the sale and consumption of alcohol, the requirement of correct quality track running rails, along with properly fenced and controlled tie-up stalls, prohibiting the public from direct access to the horses, the properly licensed and controlled operations of the equaliser and the kids' attractions and activities, all of which added cost. With the evolution of society, all these activities have become controlled and regulated by central government. This is both positive and negative. It appears that common sense and personal responsibility have disappeared and been replaced by bureaucracy. It is worth noting in the book the photo of horses racing with a running rail consisting of manuka poles and binder twine. And in another photo, a 7-wire fence. And then there is the story of the jockey knocked out from a race fall and being thrown into the Mangapiko stream to revive him. Imagine how the heavy hand of health and safety would descend now upon the clubs these days for actions such as this. But it was the way it was at that time. And that is what this book illustrates. At the time of considering our future, we held an on-site meeting in 2019 with a board member and the general manager of New Zealand Thoroughbred Racing to try to establish the likely future of health and safety requirements and whether we would be capable of carrying on. The answer was we had to spray out the whole track. We had to fix up a bit of camber down the top end. We had to put in irrigation. And then Bernard Soundry said, well, having done all of that, in the next year or two I'm going to be sending out a memo that all the running rails will have to be changed from being metal to be plastic. So that was all what we had to do to comply to be able to run a 1 day a year picnic meeting. And so $100,000 with falling attendance and falling income, it became, we had to make the decision, the end was the end. So I come back to my opening observation that this book nicely reflects the progress of society over the last 50 years. And I mention the word progress with a question mark. I can imagine my grandfather and grandfather turning in their graves when they knew how much central government and bureaucracy control our lives compared to what the first 50 years anyway of the Alexandra Racing Club was. Number 8 wire, they achieved a hell of a lot without having to have central government controlling every aspect of our lives. And that is the 21st century. That's the way things have progressed. I'm in awe of the collective contribution made to the annual Pirongia Boxing Day races by all the committee members, stewards, volunteers, and as we work our way through the book, we're going to mention that time and again. The support of trainers, jockeys and other racing club officials, community groups who also played a large part in enabling the wonderful picnic meeting to take place. It is my hope in future years readers of this book will be equally impressed and inspired by the spirit and determination that made Pirongia Boxing Day races an annual community highlight for such a long period. It was the way it was. So, having made the decision that we could no longer afford to keep going, it was decided that we needed a monument. There were rumblings that we should keep the tie-up stalls in place as a reminder of the Pirongia Boxing Day races. The idea was good in intention, but impractical. The tie-up stalls inhibited the first airway of the golf course and were a limited time of existence before they rotted and had to be replaced anyway. It was decided that a specially designed monument should be erected in the memory of 150 years. Initially, this was going to be a statue of a horse, but on homework it was found that the only material that would survive the goodness of time was bronze at a cost of about $50,000. So this is what we've ended up with. Firstly, a very big thank you to Scott Hill from Bowers Concrete. They have provided the concrete plinth, delivered and concreted it into place free of charge, their donation to the Pirongia community. Thank you to Bowers Concrete, and may the farmers remember that when next seeking concrete tanks or water troughs. Next is Garth Williams from Turbidor Funeral Services in organising and attaching the plaques. A bit of irony here, Ria Funeral Home helping provide the club's obituary. Garth also provided good advice on what we were trying to achieve. Gino from Edwards Engineering, hours of deliberating what material to use, stainless steel versus aluminium, how we are going to incorporate the photo of light fingers, how we are going to attach the horseshoe. So it's been a work in progress. Paul McCouche from McCouche Roofing helped contribute by bringing along his mini digger and digging the hole for us. And then, as usual, Charlie. Charlie Coles will get mentioned several times. In his usual quiet way, organising, supervising, ute and trailer carting away diggings and bringing back sand, tidying up around the site, ensuring that everything was running according to plan. And then Don Gray with his tractor again, this time without the dog, helping lift and bolt the horseshoe into place. So that's the monument. The book. Here we owe a huge debt of gratitude to Alan Hall. The compilation of a salute to the past has been years in the making. It is an excellent book comprehensively covering all the major events and developments down through 150 years. And the cost to us, one new computer at a cost of about $3,000. That's it. Years of work and research back through newspapers and libraries, checking through old books, race books, contact with racing administration in Wellington, and countless hours of talking and gathering notes from the families, that have had so much involvement with the club down through the years, especially Richard Sherwin, who has the typical Sherwin brain with a great memory. We must also thank Charlie Coles again, of course, for his ongoing contribution, not only to Alan in gathering information, but also his excellent photos that you'll find in the book. Also contributing books have been Ross Ormsby, that guy Ross Ormsby, who is of course a fourth generation of the Ormsby family to be closely associated with the club. Photos also from ex-mayor and local identity from the old district family of the Livingstons, Alan Livingston. Thank you also to Grant Johnson, former editor of the Te Awamutu Courier, who brought together all the individual contributions of memories from the old identities and racing personalities that have been included at the end of the book. Also helping to bring the production together has been the editorial expertise of Kingsley Field and graphics designing of Carol Oldfield. Kingsley is here with us today. Thank you, Kingsley. Also Steve O'Malley from the Hamilton Print Shop, who printed the book. This book is another excellent example of community contribution. In the words of Kipling, to give and not to count the cost. Good old-fashioned values such as pertinent ending of a club that is so pertinent to the end of existence of a club that has been based on those values for 150 years. Thank you, Alan Hall and others, your contribution to ensuring that the legacy of the Alexandra Racing Club is recorded for posterity. So that's the monument and the book. The first Christmas sports were held in 1865, when the settlement of Alexandra had been in existence for only 18 months. At that time, the spirits of the early settlers were at low ebb. The militia of the 2nd Regiment had been allocated town sections and farm allotments, but the government unexpectedly stopped their military pay. So picture, if you will, what it must have been like then. At Christmas 1865, Thomas Finch, the proprietor of the original Alexandra Hotel in Parry Street. So we've got great-grandson, Ellis, is here representing the family. So thank you, great-grandson of Thomas. Back in 1865, you started this whole thing. The proprietor of the original hotel, which had opened in July, set out to do something about it. He put on a free public dinner for all comers that was supplemented by a cask of beer donated by the storekeepers, Scherf & Co. The Daily Southern Cross newspaper reported that more than 80 people enjoyed a first-class style meal for all comers on an uninviting day with heavy cloud and frequent showers. Then it carries on to talk about the different events that were organised. Then the next year, by Boxing Day 1866, there was a second hotel in Alexandra East. In May of that year, William Appleyard had opened the Doncaster Arms on the corner of the present-day Franklin and Crozier Streets, where the Alexandra now stands. This means that the settlement now had 2 hotel keepers competing for patronage. As a result, when Finch announced that he would repeat his Christmas sports, Appleyard responded with a rival Christmas sports event to run at the same time and only a few hundred metres away. Finch's sports at the Alexandra again consisted of 10 athletic contests, running races for men and boys, jumping contests, putting the stone, all for monetary prizes, plus catching the pig, the greasy pole, the greasy tail, and climbing the greasy pole, at which no one was succeeding, to claim the mutton at the top. The Doncaster Arms sports consisted of athletic events and the horse races. And so they were competing. The third race was run for a whip and a bridle valued at £2. And so that was, it all started, the horses galloping around the block in Pirongia. The balcony of the hotel was the grandstand, They were all hacks being ridden by the militia and the initial pioneer folk. The Alexandra Racing Club. In 1890, reference was made to newspapers to the Alexandra Racing Club. It was not known when this was formally adopted, but it first appeared in the Waikato Times in December 1890. So it changed from Pirongia to become Alexandra for some reason in 1890. After the Great War, the 1920s was a decade when racing throughout New Zealand increased in popularity following the war. The Boxing Day meetings attracted large crowds from near and far, said the Waipā Post in 1921, commenting on the fact that 70 cars were parked at the event. On this occasion, 900 people were at the Pirongia Racecourse and enjoyed a good sport until rain poured down after the fifth race. So after the war, then some of the problems of maintaining the track was not easy, particularly when stock were on parts of it. And until race day, there were several references in the club's minutes from the period seeking repairs to the track by Mr. T.R. Mounsley, the leaseholder who farmed the land at the time and whose pigs had rooted up a section of the track. So that was what they had to put up with to keep going. Despite the fact that the Alexandra Racing Clubs appears to have been better than many other small country clubs at that time, questions were being asked about its future. In 1937, for example, a meeting held to discuss the future, discussion appears to have focused on increasing funding and obtaining a clearer articulation of the club's rights regarding the use of the domain. As a result, Mayors Potts, Steele and Livingston, all names that we'll come across again shortly, old families that were involved in the running of the Pirongia Boxing Day races. Hey tangata, hey tangata, hey tangata, it is people, it is people, it is people. So I want to now mention some significant club members. William Serang from Tikopua, west of the Waipā River, was an important secretary-treasurer when the Alexandra Racing Club was established. He had played important roles in the running of the Maori race meeting at Tikopua in 1878 and became secretary of the Alexandra races from 1879 until 1896, when he was also the successful owner of Lonely, which won the Alexandra Cup in 1888 and 1890. Later, after 1900, he served as a handicapper for the club and was made a life member for services. We have with us today Kiwi and Ruth Serang. Kiwi is, I think, about 4 or 5 generations Kiwi, is it? Anyway, 4 generations? Back to William. Kiwi who... 3 generations. Thank you for coming along, Kiwi, to represent the Serang family. Eugene Orban. Frederick Lang, William Beat, the Beat family. There was William, then there was Ted, then there was Claude, William, Ivan and Fred, who served as stewards. William's wife Jane Beat sponsored Beat Memorial races. Frederick Potts, Arthur Chappell, William Chappell, members of Parliament included in here. Jock Livingstone came to farm at Pirongia, where he became a member of the Alexandra Racing Club, and from 1920 was both a committee member and a race day steward until 1957. So that's 37 years. His service was recognised with the award of a life membership in 51. He married Margaret, a daughter of club stalwart Tom Steele, who I mentioned before, the Steele family, and their sons Ken and Don Livingston, and now they in turn have been succeeded by their Don's sons, David and Mike. I don't know, David or Michael here? One of the Livingstons? David is here. So they've been of Livingston Construction, and they've been sponsors for a long time. So there's another one of the old families. Boyd Atheri, or Boy as he was known, who founded Kaipiha, was president of the club from between 1987 and 2001, during the golden years, after serving on the committee and being a long-standing steward. He was the grandson of H. Reynolds, the second Waikato militiaman, who played an active role in the development of the early Christmas sports. 4 generations of the Ormsby family. I'm going to get Ross to say a few words. 4 generations. The last 2 generations are here. And then, of course, there's the Sherwin family. And we've got 2 generations of the Sherwin family. Murray Walter. And we have brother-in-law, of course, Charlie and Barbara. Both of whom are now life members. Peter Grieve, he couldn't be here. He was involved for a period. Tom Brown, George Miles, and of course Ern and Shirley Gray. Jim Lambert, Jim's here, was a starter for years. John Humphreys was our starter. Jim's not here, but John is. Sorry about that, John. Other supporters. Rogie is here. Rogie says he doesn't want to have any words. Anne, is Anne here? Anne Brown. Where's Anne? Thank you, Anne. We couldn't have you without you. Not only did owners and trainers Ken and Anne Brown bring many thoroughbred starters to Pirongia, but as young jockeys, Ken also rode here in the 50s. Later, with an international reputation, he added prestige to the Boxing Day races by returning to ride here again. His wife Anne also rode here on a number of occasions. Like Graham Rogerson, they became honorary members of the club. Thank you, Rogie. Thank you, Anne. Association with other racing clubs. Let's keep moving on. Sponsorship. The Alexandra Cup. The race was, the main race was the Molly Dawson Alexandra Cup. So when it came time to actually finding the cup, I couldn't track it down. And Keith couldn't remember. He said, "Push, I can't remember." So I went back through the owners and trainers of all the winners of the main race back to the year 2000. Rogie was determined that he'd run it about 3 times, but he was determined he didn't have the cup. And anyway, we do have a cup. Where's the cup, Ray? Down by the barbecue. And that cup is was allocated in 1921, and then it was given to the Shaw family in 1925 because whoever it was won the race 3 times in a row. So that cup is here. So if you go to the book, you'll find it's time to get on to the people. And as part of that, the legacy, there it is. Thank you, Ray, the Shaw family. So that was, that's 101 years old. That was first presented in 1921. I talked before about the community, to give and not to count the cost. Don Gray, an interesting example. In an annual report I wrote, for years he has been at every working bee, complete with tractor, trailer and dog, fulfilling all the different requirements, such as erecting runner rails, erecting birdcage fencing, installing toilets, etc. And on race day, he is in charge of manning the gates from 6 a.m. When that duty is finished, he then starts again to tidy up and reinstate everything. Such comments were not unusual. Such commitment was not unusual. As Don Gray said later, that was what people in rural communities do. And that is, to me, the best example of exactly what we've been able to achieve. So we're now to Charlie Coles, to the life members, to people who have made a contribution at the back of the book. Charlie is amazing what some of the things that he says in respect of the input that he's put in and his brother-in-law and so on down through the years. It's a must read. Thank you, Charlie. Barbara is now a life member, and Barbara's here with us. Where's Barbara? Oh, there she is. Thank you, Barbara. Don Gray, I've spoken about Don. Don doesn't want to have a few words, he says. One of the, also at the back of the book, Nick van der Sand has made a contribution, Anne Brown has made a contribution, Bruce Sherwin's made a contribution, Colin Forson, Lang Kerr. So, Ross, yes please. So, basically that's what's, that's as quickly as I can, trying to go back over 150 years to try and paint the picture of what Pirongia was like, what the country was like in the 1860s, vis-a-vis what you see around you here today. Ross.
Thanks, Don. A round of applause for Don, especially he was instrumental in that plaque. Many hours of work went into it. I think it's terrific the job he's done there. Thanks, Don. And now to a family, third or fourth generation, maybe 50, saying Ross Ormsby.
Hi everyone. I'll be brief. I just wanted to say I grew up, and our family grew up coming to the races. I haven't missed a race day. I know my father tells me he hasn't missed one, and I heard my grandfather Bob say he hadn't missed one. So that's the sort of involvement we've had. We grew up getting ready on Christmas days for Boxing Day, and Dad and our family just being part of, I believe, organising and getting things ready. Father said he talked about putting in the tea tree around the track with his father, and I imagine grandfather and those relations like the Saranks and all our families have been involved since then and previous generations. So it's interesting to think that we've all amongst the years been involved with each other, right from possibly my great-great-grandfather Robert Ormsby, the first school teacher here, and then the next generations of all those brothers, sisters along the way. So it's interesting to see the Finches and wonder what our involvement was back in those generations. So many families here have put a lot of work in and been involved with the Equalisator for years. You just see how many families show up and do a lot of work. So we may have been involved through generations, but the amount of work that I've seen go on is incredible. So thank you very much. Hand it over to who's next.
Thanks, Ross, and that concludes the formalities for this evening. We've had a terrific evening, great background. There's some great stories still to tell, I'm sure, especially as the funny juice takes a hold. Bar will stay open as long as it's needed, and that barbecue will be ready to go shortly. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for your attendance. That's the formalities over. Enjoy it.